The National Assembly during the week finally approved the request by the Edo State government for a $75 million loan from the World Bank. The approval came despite some criticisms by politicians and some residents of Edo State who are not comfortable with the government taking this loan. However, the Senate ad hoc committee set up to consider the loan request concluded that the Edo State government reasonably justified the borrowing and has acceptable debt sustainability levels. I'm Linda Kibe, and you're welcome to the Gavel. The Edo State government would be heaving a sigh of relief as both chambers of the National Assembly approved a $75 million World Bank loan for the state. The approval came despite some criticisms by politicians and some residents of the state. The $75 million loan is the second batch out of a total $255 million from the World Bank Development Policy Operation. The Senate had earlier set up a committee to consider the loan request and get back to the Senate. The chairman of a Senate committee presented the report on the floor.
The credit facility will consolidate on gains made in key sectors of the economy in the state. The first tranche of the facility granted was in 2013. Funds from the loan facility will be used to finance key projects of the state, to stimulate internal generated revenue, develop key infrastructure that will attract private investment, and of course, increase employment opportunity.
Senator Gaya also said the Edo State government has reasonably justified the borrowing and has an acceptable debt sustainability level.
The committee recommends that the Senate do approve the Edo State Development Policy Operation 2, that's DPO2, in the sum of $75 million as requested by President Muhammadu Buhari. Number 7, conclusion. The project earmarked by the state government to be funded from the credit facility when fully implemented will boost the socio-economic development of the state.
But a lawmaker from Edo State is not entirely optimistic about the approval for the loan.
Edo State government has qualified for this loan. Stringent conditions have been set by the World Bank. I'm happy these conditions have been met by Edo State government. The projects that will be used are projects that will increase the revenue base of the state, are projects that will enhance investment opportunities of Edo State.
Borrowing plan that has been approved previously by this Senate, and it's done in tranches, and it's a World Bank loan. They have strict rules, regulations that guide these loans. In view of the fact that this Senate is the one that approved the first tranche, and the fact that today we have so many other things on the other paper that we want to consider, I want to further move that we approve the loan.
We are saying that the DPO1 that was taken by the state government for things that were not visible, now that the government of Edo State has promised that they are going to take the DPO2 to finance projects that will be tangible and visible on roads, development, we don't have any problem with it. And finally, Mr. President, I want to say that on behalf of the people of Edo State, a lot of apprehensions have been raised. And outrightly, the people have said they don't want the loan.
In the House of Representatives, lawmakers approved the loan smoothly. Meanwhile, the Auditor General of the nation has raised an alarm that the Lake Chad is drying up incredibly fast from 25,000 square kilometers in 1960 to just 1,500 square kilometers at present. The Auditor General gave the warning when he came to submit the special audit reports to the Clerk of the National Assembly. He warned that there is a strong correlation between shrinking Lake Chad and insecurity in the northeast, and urged that the Lake Chad must be saved from extinction.
It was the report jointly done by Cameroon, Chad, Niger, and Nigeria. The report on the drying up of Lake Chad In 1960, Lake Chad had about 25,000 square kilometers. But now, it has dried up and is remaining just 1,500 square kilometers, from 25,000 in 1960 to just 1,500. And so the whole message of this report is that Lake Chad is drying up and it should be saved. Otherwise, we will continue to have these activities that are not actually very, very palatable to Nigeria.
In an attempt to ensure that the federal government complies with the 2015 Budget and Fiscal Responsibility Act, the House of Representatives has set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the implementation of capital projects in the 2015 budget. The motion passed unanimously despite heated debate on the floor as some lawmakers spoke against the motion. In another motion, the House also resolved to investigate the debt profile of all tiers of government and how these loans comply with the Fiscal Responsibility Act.
One major point of disagreement between past executives and the Parliament has been the level of implementation of national budgets. Once again, the matter came up in the House of Representatives as a motion of privilege. A lawmaker, Patrick Asadu, said the executive appears to have abandoned implementation of capital projects in the 2015 budget.
We've done 2 quarters and we're on the 3rd one, sir. I'm worried that as a member of this House, elected on promises made and agreements reached, I'll be faced with the onerous task of explaining that, as in the past, as with previous governments and as with previous appropriations, that this all the appropriations made. And more worrisome also is that we are spending about 4 trillion on recurrent, but about 500 billion on capital is not being implemented.
The motion immediately drew reactions.
If we agreed that the date of enactment was May 6th, and the fiscal responsibility copiously referred to by my colleague gives this government 3 months, and if it determines that there are not insufficient funds, they can restrict and stop operation. It is there. So on that point of order, on that point of law, I believe that this motion is premature because the government is still within its timeline.
Whatever the case is, I think it is proper. It is proper for this House as a Parliament to have information as to what is wrong with that budget. Any information in the papers, I believe, is not an information that the House can rely upon, since we have our own mechanism for getting information that is manifestly unassailable, verifiable, information that the House can work on. And nobody is saying this or that from the tune of the motion. That is what I understand. Imputations are not being made, even though people are capable of reading meanings into it. But the truth is that as the House of the Nigerian people, we need to know what is happening with the budget, because that is the most important piece of legislation that we do. And so I suggest that we take this motion, and whatever information is there, even if there are no funds, if we're setting a committee or any substantive committee in the future that will work on this, they will be able to even verify this information from government, that we looked into this matter and indeed the funds are not available. And then based on that, we can have an informed position as a House which we can sell to our constituents.
It goes down to our duties as National Assembly on how to make sure that the federal government of Nigeria abide by the terms of the Fiscal Responsibility Act, and the National Assembly to oversight the proper implementation and even the processing of preparing the budget.
The motion was then put to a vote.
Those in support of the motion as amended say aye. Those against it say nay. The ayes have it.
The House immediately set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the matter and report back to the House. Meanwhile, the House also approved an investigation to check violations of the Fiscal Responsibility Act by all tiers of government. The sponsor of the motion said the rate at which government at all levels go about borrowing is disturbing.
The House also notes that the Section 42, subsection 1b, and 42, sub 3, and 42(4) of the Act make provisions for the management of debts and indebtedness by all tiers of government in the country. They stop that the rate at which governments at all levels go about borrowing, both internally and externally, is so worrisome, to the extent that those sections of the Act have been flagrantly violated in terms of rate of borrowing, purpose of borrowing, terms of borrowing, the manner of approvals, setting overall limit of the consolidated debts, and other forms of violations, and consideration for the current status of Nigeria's national income. Realize that most of the states that are owing salaries to their civil servants and indebted to the contractors are those that have borrowed heavily and now suck into the vortex of debt repayment and servicing, since they did not emphasize the current financial challenges.
The House will be expected to receive a report on this investigation in the next 6 weeks. The House has now proceeded on a 6-week recess.